You're listening to Life with Herpes, and this is episode 83. Alexandra Harbushka, host of the podcast Life with Herpes. And as you know, I'm always excited to be here with you. I'm always grateful, honored, blessed, humbled, excited. And it is a privilege to be able to be speaking about herpes to you all. So today I am also very excited. As you know, we don't have guests very often on our show, especially men. I know that's something I have heard in emails and comments from you guys. You're like, hey, can we get a dude on here? Like this, it's great, but we need a dude. So I found a dude and he is going to be a bundle of energy. I also was on his podcast. Well, I don't know when it's airing, but we recorded last week. So he is the host and the creator of Something Positive for Positive People. And we'll get a little bit more into what this is about. So I bring to you our awesome guest, Courtney Brame. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What an intro. Like, it's so organized compared to mine. I just go, hi, I'm Courtney, and this is the podcast, and here's my guest. And I feel like I'm lazy for making them introduce themselves. I give like a vague description of who they are. It's like
no.
Age, race, sex, and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I know. Yeah, I liked being on yours because I think it's always cool to see. I love hearing where people are from, like where are you from? What's your age? All that. So why don't I go on ahead and flip it on you?
Okay.
So Courtney, where are you joining us from?
I am in St. Louis, Missouri, which happens to be known as the STD capital of the world at this moment.
Right.
Yeah. I'm talking about being in the right place at the right time.
Clearly.
I am 29 years old.
Okay.
African-American male. I'm in the relationship currently. Sexual preference is women. What else do I ask people? Oh, career field. I am a personal trainer and I grade commercials.
Cool. This is awesome. Yeah, I know. It's interesting, Courtney, because I was doing research. Well, I'm always doing research on herpes and STDs, and I noticed that St. Louis is the STD capital. Why do you think that is?
So I had this conversation with someone who reached out to me from one of the local newspapers, and they were asking the same thing. And I was like, I kind of didn't even know that because like I haven't been necessarily involved with all STDs. It's just been primarily herpes and trying to get in contact with people who have HIV. But I believe when we spoke, the lady was saying that the rates were highest for chlamydia, gonorrhea. And I think that the rates in general are so high because those are curable STDs. So when those are reported so often, the numbers are just up, and that's what it is, in my opinion.
That's probably a good point because people with chlamydia or gonorrhea, I'm not an expert in them, but I know the symptoms are different for men and women a lot of times. And a lot of times it can go unnoticed for such a long period of time. And then when you're just like, I'm in so much pain, then you go in and you're not as embarrassed maybe. Again, I don't know. I haven't had that situation, but maybe you're not as embarrassed with something that is curable opposed to herpes because there's a stigma with all STDs, obviously. But the number one, I believe, is herpes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's because it's easy to make fun of. It's not always life-threatening, and it's something that, like, it's not AIDS, it's not HIV, it's not something that can, kill you. So it's real easy to make fun of. And then, you don't hear from people with herpes defending herpes in a case where, we're all with friends. Let's say there's 10 of us in a room, someone makes a herpes joke. Statistically speaking, at least 2 people in that room have herpes, and the most educated person who doesn't have herpes is probably not going to say anything in fear of people thinking they have herpes. And then the person or people who are sitting there with herpes are just like, yeah, whatever, and just kind of going with it. So
Yeah.
but it's so easy to make fun of.
I mean, we've all been in that situation.
Yeah, I was. And one of my friends in the room knew, and we just looked at each other like, ha ha, and that was
Yeah.
it. And I mean, I'm guilty of it. At that point in time, I was nowhere near as okay with this as I am now. And looking back, like I wish I would have been able to just say, hey, that's not how that works. Like, even if I didn't say specifically I have herpes, I could have been, that was an opportunity to educate a group of people about what herpes is, and just that, it's not, it may not even be what you're thinking it is. And it's just like the stigma itself is as big as it is because it has a louder voice from people who don't have it than a voice from the people who do have it, because we choose to not really speak up about it and keep it to ourselves and just go on and live our lives.
Right, because we've been told to do that. It's embarrassing to tell people you have herpes. It's chlamydia or gonorrhea or HPV, human papillomavirus. Like those are all, they're not stigmatized and they go away.
Mm-hmm.
HPV you have for the rest of your life, but it does lie dormant and it doesn't affect you anymore. Um, um, but yeah, I mean, there's times when you're in, so like, for example, speaking about herpes, I went to Target with a girlfriend recently. She was staying with me and I don't know what I had to get. I had a cold. I told you I had a cold and I had to get something to stop coughing or get it out. Like it was in there. It was gross.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, I want to find some herpes stuff, because I can remember walking through other drugstores and they don't use the word herpes. It's cold sore, fever blister, cold sore, fever blister, sun blister. Not once does it say herpes in the section. And I was trying to find it at Target just to see how Target promotes it, and I keep a tab, of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find the section, and I didn't feel well because I was like foggy myself. I had that stuff going on. I was like, I just want to go home and take this and go back to bed. But
not a lot of people can go into Target and go to the only area where they need things from. So congratulations to you.
Thank you. I was done. I didn't feel, Target stresses me out because you come back with shit you don't need,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is so true. No one wants to associate with the word herpes. It's like a creepy word.
Yes.
And why can't we just call it what it is?
Mm-hmm. And people with cold sores, I don't know if they're in denial about it. Oftentimes, I can't speak for everyone, but just the people I've interacted with, they're like, oh, it's not herpes, it's a cold sore. And last I checked, herpes were cold sores. So, I mean, like, I guess it just depends on the person, in terms of, are they comfortable with it, or are they in denial about it? Are they just telling people, oh, I have a cold sore, or I get cold sores, just for the sake of, other people being miseducated and not knowing that cold sores are herpes? Because before I had herpes, I thought cold sores were cold sores, herpes were herpes. So if you say cold sore, I just think, oh, I don't want that shit. And that was it. Had you said herpes, I'm like, whoa, I'm not kissing anybody. But
right. Or it's like, oh, I nicked it shaving. If you're a dude, you're like, oh, I nicked myself. Or like women, it's like, oh, I bumped it's like, no, you didn't. Like you said, herpes is herpes. A cold sore is not herpes. I mean, a cold sore is herpes. Deal with it. But let's talk about you, Courtney. How long have you had herpes? So you have herpes. You're going to talk about this. You have herpes. How long have you had it?
Okay. It has been 6 years now.
Okay.
I was diagnosed with genital herpes simplex virus type 2. That's how it was presented to me. And when I read it, I was like, oh, what is this? And, you see herpes, but you're like, is that herpes, or is this like something else? Because the way that it was worded wasn't what I was used to. So herpes simplex virus, to me at that point in time, just made me think, oh, this isn't, like the herpes. It's probably like a sub category of it. But I woke up, I had graduated college, I was at home in my I was in my grandmother's house, and I had a room there. I graduated, and I was working, living with my grandmother. And one day I woke up and I had fever symptoms, flu symptoms. I had a fever, aches, chills. I was hot, I was cold. And I get up, I go to the restroom. And when I go to the restroom, I look down and it literally looks like someone dripped acid in like an area on the top of my, can I say dick?
Yeah, totally.
All right, cool. It looked like someone like had a dropper. It just went psh, 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 on my dick. And I remember screaming. I was like, Mama! And so she comes and well, she didn't come in there, but I was
Yeah.
like, we need to go to urgent care right now. And so we go to urgent care, and just to sum it up, the short version is I went in and the guy, he gave me antibiotics for chlamydia, gonorrhea. Of course, I'm in St. Louis.
Right.
He's like, I'm pretty sure that's herpes. So here's a prescription, here's a pamphlet, there you go. And then you just sent me on my way. And, I've never really had a high opinion of urgent care professionals because it's like, you're in there, we're in and out of there to do a job. Like they're straight, direct to the point, as opposed to like your physician, your family
Hmm.
doctor. So I didn't think anything of it. I didn't take it personal, but I was like, shit, this is all I get. So I go home and I'm like, damn, like this is my life now. So I Google, and of course, you know what you see when you Google
Oh,
herpes.
it's
You see
disgusting.
the
It's so scary.
yeah. And granted, at that point in time, I was experiencing the worst of the worst, but I found out, oh, it goes away. So I thought that
Hmm.
this was a permanent thing. Like I thought it was going to always look like that and always feel
Mm.
like that. But then as I did more Googling, I got to the point where I was like, okay, how do you manage this? How do you treat this? And a couple of the first things I saw were to work out, make sure to be mindful of your diet and manage your stress. At that point in time, I had made the decision to stop working out because I was done playing football. I didn't have to run anymore. And I was like, I'm not doing this again. I don't have to. So, and then, part of me thinks that my immune system just may have been high at the point of contact to where I may have been positive before, but due to the fact that I completely changed up my fitness lifestyle, that gave herpes a chance to emerge. But I mean, there's no way to prove that. There's no way to know. I do not know where I got it from. I did call my ex at that point in time and let her know, and she was like, "Okay, well, I'll get tested." And to this day, she does not have genital HSV2 as well. So that's good. I was going into another relationship too at that point in time. So I was in like this I won't say limbo, but it was like, all right, I have to tell her, and I want to know where it came from. So I messaged the last few girls that I had been with, and all of them said no, they didn't have it. So like, oh, okay. So then maybe this was something I just had for a while. So going into my new relationship, I disclosed to my partner, and it turns out she had known someone close to her who had also had herpes. So she was accepting of it, and we went on and pursued a relationship together. And eventually, that didn't work out for a number of reasons, but that that's I mean pretty much like the story of me contracting herpes. And
Yeah.
after that I was in a relationship for a while, and it didn't necessarily affect me having herpes until I was single again. So,
Ah.
and that
So
was
you were
mhm,
23 when this happened.
yes,
And then it
23.
goes, so that's young.
Yeah, it is. And especially to just be getting out of college and getting your
Yeah.
life started. I've got a salary job. Like the sky's the limit at this point.
Oh
And
yeah.
then I get this. So, and I take it now like as a sign maybe to have changed some things, which I did. Around that time, I did get a personal trainer, and he showed me how to eat. I thought that I was eating healthy,
Hmm.
but that was not the case. He'd be like, I remember I went to I think it was KFC where they have the grilled chicken. And
Yeah.
I would go to KFC. He'd be like, send me everything you eat over the last week. I send it to him. He's like, Courtney, you ate KFC? I was like, yeah, but I got the grilled chicken. It's okay. He's like, it's still fucking KFC, dude. It's like, oh. And then I'd go days where I wouldn't eat meat, and I'd send him what I eat. He goes, why are you eating potatoes and macaroni and cheese? And like, I'm just completely carving up. Like, so once I got into the routine of understanding, the good fats, proteins, carbs, and incorporating more of that into my diet, and then getting back into a workout routine, I can say that I can count on one hand the number of potential outbreaks that I've had. because I'd feel the tingling come along, but I'll just take my medication. You take one pill a day, 3 days, and bam. So whenever you get really acquainted with your body, and once I was able to do that, I was good. Like I can't say that I had any other visible symptoms except for maybe once or twice.
How often do you get outbreaks?
Mm, Less than once every 2 years. If we
Oh,
were
that's
going to
awesome.
do an average, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you just don't know what your body's going to do. And there's times there's again ebbs and flow in your life, right? And there's times when you're stressing your body and you know it and you feel it and you're just pushing it and you're like, all right, if I don't slow down right now in about 2 days, I know
Yep.
it's going to happen.
Yep.
Or eating crap or eating, foods, which may not be crap. Like for me, I know during the holidays, um, I'm not a big holiday party eater. But like Christmas and like Christmas Eve, Christmas, and there's usually some leftovers. So like 3 days of just good food, right? Like the
Yeah.
good cheese that's like really stinky and like the cakes and the cookies and 3 days of that. That's tough on my body too. I can feel it.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so yeah, that's great that you get it like less, you're once every 2 years. That's awesome. Do you know if you've ever passed it to anybody?
No, as far as I know, I checked in before I did the podcast. I wanted to make sure to be mindful of the privacy of the previous partners that I had, and to this day, I've not passed HSV on to anyone else.
See, I haven't either. And I think it's because we've educated ourselves. I think
Hmm.
it's because we've communicated with our partners. And I think it's hey, I'm going to talk to you about this. Like, this is what's going on in my life right now. This is what's happening today. And you know what? We shouldn't have sex today
Yeah.
or whatever. And that is just as, I think, hard on the person that's receiving the information as it is on the person that's having to tell it, right?
Agreed. Yes.
I don't know. I haven't been in that situation, but I know from my husband and my partner, he's like, when that happens, he's like, I'm sorry, is there anything I can do for you?
Hmm.
Like, is there anything I can do? Like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think, and who knows, right? We don't really know why the virus gets, like, why do you have it? Why do I have it? Why do we, this community, why do we have it? I don't know, right? Why do other people not have it? And they've been exposed to it multiple times. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And it's just
Um,
how that goes to show how tricky and evasive it is. We can't pinpoint where it came from or how long we've had it. There's no cure and all these other things. And we tend to really newly diagnosed people beat ourselves up about it like, oh my God, I could have avoided this. But that may not have even been the case. And it's something that you could have gotten in childhood. You could have gotten it a number of ways through skin to skin contact, not just having sex.
oh, totally. And that's the other thing we don't think of is we think just the act of having sex is what transmits STDs or STIs and herpes specifically,
Mhm.
because that's what we're talking about. But we think the act of sex. But what we forget is there is so much that goes on, like before sex, after sex, like the
Yeah,
foreplay, the or even not having sex and just not washing your hands,
yeah,
coming into contact with somebody that has it and not washing your hands or wiping your eyes or, that's, people, we can transmit it to our eyes. That's something that
yeah,
we don't really talk about or we know. And that's the thing is it's not just sexually, it's in
right.
your sex organs,
Mhm.
but it's not necessarily sexual.
Correct. And that's one of the things that we need to that will help. It will help when more people like you and I are able to use the opportunities that we have to the people closest to us to educate them. Like, that's not what herpes is. And like I told you, when I found out, I thought, oh, it's going to always look like this. So the reason I thought that I was not going to be able to I avoid all STDs was because, okay, if there's a sign, I'll be able to smell something or I'll see something. Like, I will know if this person has an STD, or I
Right.
will avoid a certain type of person uh, under the assumption that they have an STD. But you can't look and tell if someone has an STD. And that's one of the things that uh, came into me just from the stigma in general.
That's so I was watching, as we know, Usher had his huge about a year ago, right?
Yeah.
His huge ordeal. And I don't really know what happened with that. It kind of fizzled, but it was his aunt or his cousin or someone did a YouTube video. I don't know if you watched it, and I watched it, and she was saying, she's like, there's other activities that we can do before having sex to check it out and see what's going on down there. And that just goes back to what you're saying, Courtney, is that you can't look at someone's whatever you're looking at and say, oh yeah, that person totally, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure has herpes.
Yeah. You
Absolutely.
just,
Guaranteed.
yeah.
Right. Or because that person looks a certain way. Oh yeah, she totally has it.
Yeah.
Or he totally has it. Or,
Or even with lifestyle, like, just because
uh-huh.
you have multiple partners or you've slept with X amount of people doesn't mean you have an STD, doesn't mean you've contracted it or come into contact with it. Like, there's no way of knowing.
Nope. Absolutely not. There's just no way. And a lot of times too, I'm sure of, there's so many people with it and they have no idea that they have it.
Yes, yes. And that's a whole separate conversation, just with the reasoning that the CDC, Center for Disease Control, doesn't include that in the standard STD panel. And I'm hearing and learning that it's just due to the psychological trauma that comes
Mm-hmm.
with it. And it's like, because of the stigma, doctors don't want to test people for HSV or herpes, and just the reactions to it. A lot of people go through that, oh my God, I'm going to be alone forever, go into depression, become depressed and stressed, and become suicidal even in some cases. So that, I guess I see it from their perspective, but at the same time, like, not knowing can also do harm. So it's like, which of the two evils do you prefer?
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you want to be proactive or reactive with it?
Yeah.
If you're proactive with it and you get tested and you have it, and like you and me, like we both know we have it, obviously we wouldn't be here. And we've talked about it with our partners, we've had conversations with our partners, we're open about it, we follow, we listen to our body, we eat healthy, we exercise, all the things that we
Mhm.
can do to prevent having an outbreak and B, transmitting it. um, but when you don't know you have it,
It's a
you
lot
know,
harder to do that. Yeah.
it's harder to do that, and you don't know you have it, and maybe you're not educated in it because I would never know, not me.
Yeah.
And then that's why it continues to get passed. I mean, this virus clearly wants to survive, right? Otherwise we would have eliminated it at some point. It wouldn't have made it. Darwinism, or however you want to look at it, the theory of evolution. This virus is a very, very strong contagious virus that has made it through centuries, you know,
Mhm.
hundreds and hundreds of thousands of I don't even know how old the earth is, but
Yeah.
it's made it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just shit as old as we are, I guess. Like, no one just all of a sudden popped up with herpes. I was talking to someone about this, and it was just like, I was just playing with the idea. Where did herpes come from? Where could it have come from? Like, I did it just emerge from us? Has it always been there? And then, like, just some people show symptoms, and over time, like, it became a big deal, or what? Like, there's so many different ways to look at this outside of the stigma. All of the possibilities there are, that tell the story that you want to tell, or give you a shift in perspective. And a lot of us just tend to more so focus on the stigma rather than the truthful actual experience of the individuals who are living with it.
So a question for you, because you're interviewing people that have STDs, not just specifically herpes. So you're talking to people who are, they have chlamydia, they have HIV, they have AIDS, they have gonorrhea, they're in non-monogamous relationships. I mean, you cover it, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel that there is a similar stigma for all STDs, STIs, or is it just for us here? You know, we obviously feel that it's us with herpes because that's what we're dealing with. But is it the same across the board? Do other people that are dealing with their diagnosis, do they have a similar situation?
Yes. So outside in, you're a person who doesn't have an STD or doesn't know you have an STD. So when you look at us, you look at us as a whole, collectively. You see that you have an STD, and it's almost categorized into two types. One you can get rid of, one that you can't get rid of. If you can get rid of it, oh, that's a misfortune. If you
Mm-hmm.
can't get rid of it, you're dirty, disgusting, or whatever else the stigma says. And as I mentioned earlier, the stigma is behind having STDs in general is more so fueled by people who don't have STDs, people who don't know what it's like, people who don't have the right proper education to talk about STDs. So once you contract herpes, once you get gonorrhea, that's when you become a fucking herpes STD expert, because now you need to know for yourself. Now that it affects you, you care about it, you want to know how to treat it, and you become more educated than you were when you were on the outside looking in. So yes, to answer your question, we all face stigma. We all deal with the what is this person going to think if they knew, like if they knew that I had an STD, how would that person view me? How is this going to affect my life? You know, we look out there rather than going inside out and being like, okay, now I'm in the stigma. I need to figure out what this means for me and make the necessary changes in my life to accommodate for this new roommate that I have in my body, and be able to, move forward in life with my life as redirected by this,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case may be. And then, like I said, with the curable ones, there's not really, because they don't have to talk about it. You can deny it if someone calls you and goes, "Did you give me chlamydia, gonorrhea?"
Like,
Uh,
nope, it wasn't me.
if I did, you better go get the pill for that shit before it gets worse, and that's the end of it. So
Right.
the stigma on the outside is similar. We all deal with the same psychological effects. We think that we are what other people have told us we are because of the association that's been made for people who have an STD, rather than defining ourselves and being like, this is who I am. This is something that now is just, it comes with me. That's really how we need to get to the point of viewing it, as opposed to outside of us, like this is what the stigma is and this is what I am, because that is not the case.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, 1 out of 4 sexually active adults have an STD.
And we're looking at it that way, like that is a high number.
A lot
And
of people.
even the people who have an STD that weren't that haven't been sexually active. Like I know people who've been born with herpes, born with HIV, and people like these people now are growing up into a society that thinks, oh, you have herpes or HIV, you're disgusting, you're gross. Like no
Mm-hmm.
one's gonna want to be with you, no one's gonna have sex with you, and that just is not the case. And
Right.
it's just one of those things where ignorance is really what's fueling the stigma behind any and everything. And education is the only way to get that broken down. And the more of us there are, more educators, the more people who are like, no, that's not what herpes is, and correctors, the easier it's going to be for little Tommy or Jane who gets diagnosed, newly diagnosed with herpes, to really snap back from that state of negative emotion and depression.
Totally. You know, it why do you think we have that stigma? Is it because it's sex? Like
Yeah.
because we don't,
Now, yeah,
yeah,
we're getting in a deep conversation now. So, from
because
what
we
I
don't have the
realize,
same, like, if again, strep throat,
mhm,
you don't, or mono, that's the kissing one, right? Those are
it's
all
pretty.
viruses,
Yeah.
well, strep is not a virus, but mono is the herpes family. It's a
Mm,
part of the herpes family as well, and that's not a big deal. And that's actually worse long term in your body. Mono is really bad for you. It causes so many other, the Epstein-Barr virus causes so many other things in your life that can affect you as an adult as you age and go and continue to mature.
Mhm.
But it's not a big deal because it's mono, right?
Yeah,
Everybody gets it or
it's
whatever.
it's because they have such, like medical term names. They're not associated with sex. And I think that, well, I'm finding that the more I do this podcast, the more I talk to people, the more I'm learning. The more I
Right.
talk to people like you who are informed, the more I learn. Like I just found out mono was in the herpes family, and that's just not something that I've had to look up or understand. So, bam,
Right.
now that's a piece of knowledge that I didn't have before. So, when we talk about sex in general. I just was speaking with the host of the Sex Positive Families podcast, and she talks about sex education, sexual health in the household. In my experience, it's absent or
Mhm.
it's inaccurate. Uh, I was always taught wear condoms, don't get anyone pregnant, and if you get an STD, this is what it looks like. And as you more and more do things that have a different consequence than what you were taught, you feel like you're invincible. You're like, oh, they didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. My parents, I don't have to wear condoms all the time. I don't have to wear condoms. She's on birth control, so she's not going to get pregnant. So
We're
that's
good.
yeah, we're good, and that's where it is. That's where I believe a lot of people have that misconception is, well, I can't get pregnant. I'm clean. I don't show any symptoms. You're clean, so we can do this. And as much as I hate that word, like that's the one that gets used. And it's a better word for me is when we are able to say, I'm clear, or I've tested, I'm clear of STDs as of this date of testing for all of the particular STIs or STDs that I've been tested for. So the sex education, it starts at home, and parents don't want to have it. Like I don't want to picture my infant child, my daughter, my son. I mean, I'm more empathetic towards the son. Like, oh man, you're gonna go off and you're gonna have all the sex. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just like what society has taught us was acceptable. Like for my daughter, I'm going to teach her never have sex. This is going to happen. You're going to have babies and you don't want to do that. And it's going to make you fat. Like these are the kinds of things that old Courtney, who was programmed by society's man, woman, sex programming, would have thought. But like now that I'm on the other side of it, like I have herpes, and I remember what I went through. Not everybody's built to handle things the way that I am, as you know, and talking to people who have been so depressed that they contemplate suicide. And there's no telling like how many lives have been affected as a result of that. Like how many people actually did kill themselves because they had an STD and they were just so ashamed. And that's just not even what people would think or know because we have to be so private about it. Whereas if
Right.
we could talk about sex and if there was more of a positive perception of sex, then it wouldn't be such a safe place for STDs to hide. And we'd be more openly communicative about our own sexual health and what it is that we want rather than, feeling like we have to be so sneaky about it. Like it's taboo essentially.
Sex is
Um,
taboo.
yes. Even though like that's how I got here. That's how you got here. That's how our
Right.
parents got here. And people just ignore the fact like they would rather be dismissive towards it. And I don't know if it's laziness or if it's the parents thinking that the school's responsibility is to educate their children on sex, but it definitely starts at home. And you have to be able to like children, nickname their private parts.
Right.
What good is it doing them to, have a cookie or a hot dog, wiener, or whatever, in the event that something tragic happens? If they are molested or anything and they can't properly communicate with you, someone touched my vagina, someone touched my penis, and be able to use those kinds of terms. And like, just remove that shame that's instilled with us at a young age. Because if you touch yourself, you're like, no, stop, don't do that. That's bad. And you begin to associate all behaviors with your genitals and someone else's genitals to be something that needs to be hidden or secretive and in the closet. I think that in having better sex education, having the conversation more often, I think that eventually we'll raise a generation of people who when you get herpes, it's like, oh, I got herpes now. Oh well, as
Yeah.
opposed to, oh my fucking God, I'm going to kill whoever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I do too. I think that we've made sex is something we all do, right? It's all part of us. We all do it. It's a beautiful thing. Um,
So much
and
fun. And it's healthy.
it's
Like
healthy.
it's
It's good.
healthy when it's healthy. It's healthy when it's healthy.
Right, exactly. And or we masturbate or whatever. We all experience that, right? We all do some sort of sexual activity. And it's like this, but like we said, we put it in this little like dirty box.
Yeah.
It's dirty. We can't talk about it, or it's really no different than saying like, oh, here's my elbow. And you know what? We're gonna put my elbow in a dirty box
Yeah.
because I use my elbow just as much as I use any of my sex organs, right? Like we go to the bathroom just as much as we use our elbow, right? Like it all we use everything in our body every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And we may not be using it to have sex, right? You may not have sex every day, but you
Some
but
people look at
some people
that.
do. But we still use our penis or our vagina or what we still use it. Yeah, and like you said, it's a conversation that we just don't have with people, or it's not normal dinner table talk. I have a stepdaughter, and I try to be very vocal about my period. I try to talk about it. I try to bring it up when I have my period, if when we have her, and I talk about it for that reason. There's no reason to not talk about having a period. It's every female in the world has it, whether you're a dog, cat, jaguar, elephant. We all have them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing wrong, and it is what it is. And it's just interesting as I try to have those conversations with her. I'm like, oh, I'm on my period. She's like, oh, really? And I'm trying to change that whole thing, is making it's a beautiful thing. It means you're young and healthy, and your body is doing what it's supposed to be doing, opposed to, oh, so again, yeah, you're right. We just don't talk about any of that sex stuff, because it just was not permitted. it
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't okay.
Yep.
So tell me more about your podcast and
Okay.
why like what's going on? How are you helping these people? Where can people find you? Um, you know, t- tell me about the audience. I mean, what's going on in your world over here? What's going on in your herpes world?
In my herpes world. So the podcast is called Something Positive for Positive People. On social media, I manage the account under H on my chest. It's just a letter HONMYCHEST. And that's on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, and Reddit. So the podcast originally started out as me just proving a point. There was someone I met who also had herpes, and she thought it was the end of the world. And eventually she and I became friends, and she goes, hey, can I tell you something? I'm like, what? She was like, I contemplated suicide over this. I didn't think anything of it. I was like, huh, that's weird. Okay. And then after being in some chat rooms and seeing people like vent in different secret groups and support groups about wanting to commit suicide, I was just like, wait, what? Like, why is this a big deal to you guys? Like, there are plenty of people out there who are living with herpes that, I'm aware of now that I'm in the bubble. We just don't hear from them. These are people who go on to live normal lives, who have careers, have families, have hobbies, and set goals and achieve them. And we just don't hear from them because that's just how insignificant herpes is in their lives. So what I did was I shared a post in a couple of groups I'm in, and I got a handful of people to reach out and say that they would be a part of it, of me putting together this audio to let people know it's okay. Like, this isn't the end of the world. You can still go on the other side of this and do so much more than you think you're capable of at this point in time. So originally it started out as me just proving a point, and I would send it to a few people here and there that I met. And then it was like, oh, why not put this up on YouTube? And I realized I have an audio file on a video format. After it got a few hundred views, I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, how many people are being turned away from this? Like, I'd be turned off if I'm thinking I'm watching a video and then audio only platform pops up, and there's all these other factors that go into it. But I went on and invested in the podcast platform. I began to share the interviews, directing people to the podcast, where, now getting in touch with me, people are able to access the resources that I have available for them. So, or the resources I'm connected with, let me say that. So, like, if there's different support groups, I don't know exactly where to, you know, walk your hand to those places, but I can
Mm-hmm.
definitely ask the right people and get people going into the right direction. So it's turned into more of that. It's turned into an educational tool. It's really just evolving with the times. I mean, the guests that I have on, originally my goal is to get as many people on here to talk about their experience with herpes as possible. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm excluding HIV, AIDS, HPV. I don't want to exclude anyone because we all deal with the same psychological effects, the same STD stigma, and it's only right for us to not, segregate one another or categorize one another as being worse or better than another when we go through the exact same shit psychologically. So we're at 26 episodes now. Been
That's
doing this
awesome.
just around a year. And each episode, except one, which is just me, I had to drink for that one. In this episode, I'd like talk about what the podcast is and let people know what to expect. But all of the guests have been phenomenal. Many of them have been anonymous, but more people are coming on and being braver in terms of, sharing their real information. And by real information, I just mean name. Everyone says who they are, what they do, what they look like, but some people just choose to not be tagged in things. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Understandable.
yeah,
That's such a great I mean, thank you for doing this. Thank you for bringing people together in a way that you found a connection. You were talking to people in your day-to-day life, and you were able to take an idea, and that's great that you were able to take it and bring people together and
thank you.
you're welcome, and try and just break this stigma, get this shit out, get
Yeah,
get we don't want people committing suicide over this. We don't want people ruining their lives over this. We don't want all of the, all of this that happens is not worth letting a microscopic virus control our life. And that's what ends up happening is we become victims to the virus. And
mhm.
it's not worth it
It's
at
not.
all.
It's not.
So people can listen to your podcast. They can go to, are you on iTunes and
Yeah.
everywhere?
So
Okay.
iTunes, Stitcher, Podbay, Podbean, Podchaser,
You're
uh,
everywhere.
everywhere. I don't know if I'm on SoundCloud or Libsyn or not. I haven't checked. Probably should. But if you do check out the podcast, please rate it and leave a review. I'm learning that the audience tends to be very, very distant for the most part. Like anything that they can be found out, so to speak. I get
Yeah.
a lot of people who message me who don't follow me on Instagram, for example, or aren't friends with me on Facebook, or they'll just like send a message and just be like, thanks. They'll say something to a guest, and I'll pass the message on, just thanking them for sharing their story because they can relate so much. And having so many different stories puts people in position to hear and understand that you don't get an STD the way you think as someone without an STD, we have gotten ours.
Right.
So I think that in terms of that, it's really helping, and just making more people feel comfortable with being, with educating other people around them about what it means to have an STD.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for being here. I look forward to following up with you and working together with you and just everything that we can do
Absolutely.
as a team to get this message out there is what we can do. And I know the listeners enjoyed having a male voice, listening to a male perspective. Like I said, I've been told that a couple of times, like, hey, we need a dude on here. So we got you. Um, and
Happy to have
yeah, and if let's see, I'm trying to think. Go to lifewithherpes.com. You can find the show notes. You can find all the information, and I will have Courtney's information on there as well, so you can reach out to him. And if you're not a member of our community, because I don't know why not, you should be. It's awesome. Go to lifewithherpes.com, join, it's free, and you can come join our just amazing community. It is a bunch of warm, loving people just like you and me who have herpes, and we are talking about it. We are asking questions, finding comfort, and all this great stuff. So anyways, I will see you all over there. And thank you, Courtney, for being a guest on Life with Herpes.
Thank you for having me.